Hey guys, in this video, I want to talk to you about the correlation between diabetes and erectile dysfunction. Did you know that 75% of men with diabetes will develop erectile dysfunction, and that men with diabetes will likely develop or run into erectile dysfunction 10 to 15 years earlier than a man without diabetes? But the question is why? What is it about diabetes that so greatly increases the risk of developing erectile dysfunction? Well, there's actually many things that are going wrong in the body of a diabetic person, all which contribute to the increased likelihood of developing erectile dysfunction. In few words, diabetes and the underlying pathology can damage the circulatory system and the flow of blood to and from the penis or the penile shaft. Diabetes can also damage the nerves and imbalance the hormones that are responsible for producing and maintaining an erection. These are just a few ways in which diabetes can increase the risk of erectile dysfunction. But I want to dive into these in a bit more detail and paint a more clear picture so that way you have a better understanding and therefore a better idea about how you can go about remedying this issue and improving your overall health, both diabetic conditions, managing diabetes naturally, as well as erectile dysfunction. So let's dive into this in a bit more detail. What are the important factors for producing and maintaining a healthy erection? Because obviously, whatever is responsible for producing erection is being deranged to some degree, resulting in the inability to produce an erection. Now, if you hop online, you're probably going to find from the conventional medical viewpoint that nitric oxide is what's responsible for producing and maintaining an erection. That nitric oxide is what's responsible for relaxing the arteries, the muscles, and the smooth muscle wall and the capillaries to allow proper blood flow. However, although nitric oxide does have this effect, it does so more so in a stressful mannerism, meaning that at the expense of relaxing or vasodilating the circulatory system, allowing good blood flow, nitric oxide over the long term actually suppresses mitochondrial respiration. You see, nitric oxide is not necessarily the primary substance for this job. It is actually the job of carbon dioxide. You see, nitric oxide is more or less a stress substance, meaning that like other stress substances like cortisol, it tends to only be produced when the primary substances are lacking or deficient. So for example, when your body is not producing enough carbon dioxide, which is basically the byproduct of good glucose metabolism, a job of the thyroid, then in replace of the lack of carbon dioxide, nitric oxide tends to increase to sort of make up the difference for the lack of carbon dioxide. But the fact of the matter is, carbon dioxide is the primary substance responsible for governing good circulation. In fact, this is why when a person becomes hypothyroid and carbon dioxide levels decrease, a person tends to have circulatory issues. They tend to become cold. They have a low body temperature. They have cold hands and feet. They have an intolerance to cold, and they oftentimes actually have issues with their libido and sex drive because of this. So the fact of the matter is, carbon dioxide is what's responsible for relaxing the smooth muscle wall in the arteries, the muscles in the penis and the whole body, and is what's responsible for allowing the healthy flow of blood. However, nitric oxide again will come in and do this job if carbon dioxide levels are low, but over the long term, nitric oxide is actually an inflammatory mediator. Through its vasodilating effects, it also has anti-respiratory effects, meaning that it suppresses mitochondrial respiration. So what really tends to go on in circulatory issues, and erectile dysfunction just being one type of a circulatory problem, is not a deficiency of nitric oxide, but usually a deficiency of carbon dioxide. And this ties right into the picture of diabetes-induced erectile dysfunction, because a diabetic person is actually producing very little carbon dioxide, because ultimately diabetes is just the inability to oxidize glucose. Remember, as I said earlier, the ability to oxidize glucose is responsible of good thyroid function, and carbon dioxide is just that byproduct of glucose oxidation. So keep in mind that diabetes is a metabolic issue. Basically, a diabetic person, their metabolism is dysfunctioned. It's not working properly. They're not properly oxidizing glucose to make ATP, and the byproduct of that is a deficiency or a significant decrease of carbon dioxide. So this is going to result in obviously circulatory issues, because again, it is the carbon dioxide in the body that governs healthy circulation, not nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is only going to promote circulation on the short term when there's a deficiency of carbon dioxide, but that can have negative long-term effects. So that's one of the major correlations between diabetes and erectile dysfunction. Remember, a healthy erection needs a healthy supply of blood, which cannot be achieved without proper thyroid function to oxidize that glucose and produce the carbon dioxide. And that's actually one of the key features of a diabetic person, is that they have a low functioning thyroid, therefore the inability to oxidize the glucose and produce carbon dioxide. In fact, there are even studies that have confirmed the strong correlation between diabetes and an increased risk of hypothyroidism. And one of the key features of this might be because of the fact that a diabetic person also tends to have underlying imbalances that can contribute to hypothyroidism. So those things usually go hand in hand, hypothyroidism and diabetes. And the way I see it is actually diabetes is just the long-term effect of being chronically hypothyroid, because there are many things about a diabetic person that are overlapping with the hypothyroid person. For example, if you look at this study, elevated levels of prolactin is one of the major contributing factors to type 2 diabetes through its negative effects on insulin secretion. So elevated prolactin can cause insulin resistance and the inability to oxidize glucose. That's one contributing factor. But prolactin, when elevated, is also one of the contributing factors to hypothyroidism. In fact, prolactin and thyroid hormone tend to oppose and compete with one another. So when prolactin is really high, it suppresses the normal functioning of the thyroid. Vice versa, if the thyroid hormone gets low, prolactin levels get out of hand, and this could contribute to diabetes by impairing glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity. And if we connect the dots here, there's a strong correlation between erectile dysfunction and diabetes. That's the basis of this video. But there's also strong correlations between the pathologies of a diabetic person and hypothyroid people. So although not every person with hypothyroidism has diabetes, most people that are diabetic have some form of hypothyroidism. Their thyroid's not functioning optimally. And tying it in one more time, if we look at a study here, hyperprolactinemia or elevated prolactin levels is one of the major causes of erectile dysfunction. And prolactin contributes to erectile dysfunction through a variety of different mechanisms. So prolactin tends to not just suppress thyroid function, which would decrease carbon dioxide, therefore decreasing the functioning of the circulatory system and supply of blood to the penis, but elevated prolactin levels also tend to stimulate the parathyroid, another pituitary stress hormone, which not only further suppresses the metabolism and thyroid function, but it can also derange calcium metabolism, leading to the calcification or the hardening of the arteries in the small microcirculatory systems in the body, like the penile shaft. So there's a strong possibility that in the case of at least diabetes-induced erectile dysfunction, that the arteries in the tiny microcirculatory system in the penis has actually become calcified or hardened, obviously resulting in impeded blood flow. So I know this is a lot of information, but ultimately what I'm getting at is that a diabetic person does not produce enough carbon dioxide because their metabolism isn't working efficiently, and carbon dioxide is the primary substance in the body, protective substance, that promotes healthy circulation. And is again one of the major reasons that hypothyroid people become cold intolerant and have circulatory issues, because it's that carbon dioxide which allows for healthy blood flow by relaxing the smooth muscle and the capillaries and the entire circulatory system throughout the whole body, not just the penis. And other underlying factors in diabetics that could be contributing to erectile dysfunction is just one would be elevated levels of prolactin, which is further suppressing thyroid function and good systemic circulation, but also could be leading to the hardening of the arteries throughout the entire body and the penis specifically. So what can you do about it with all of this in mind? Well, there's a couple of very simple things you can do to manage diabetes. First and foremost, looking at some of the things we talked about here, would be taking a look at some helpful things to boost back up the production of carbon dioxide. And remember, your thyroid is what governs carbon dioxide production. So there's a couple of things that you could start implementing to boost thyroid function. The first would be to watch our videos on how to lower estrogen, because estrogen in general blocks the secretion of thyroid hormone. The next thing you're probably going to want to do is remove any polyunsaturated fats and oils from your diet, because these, like estrogen, actually block the secretion of thyroid hormone from the thyroid and also impair the transport of thyroid throughout the body. So not only does it block it, it stops the circulation or the delivery of thyroid hormone throughout your cells. So those are two simple things that you can do. Something else that's going to be important in managing diabetes at the root is getting a handle on your cortisol levels. Ultimately, next to elevated levels of free circulating fatty acids, high levels of cortisol is one of the major contributing factors to diabetes, because cortisol, when chronically elevated, impairs your cell's ability to use glucose. So definitely watch these videos to get some tips on how to manage elevated levels of cortisol for correcting and managing diabetes, which will help with correcting erectile dysfunction. And actually, all three of these tips, lowering the estrogen, lowering the intake of the polyunsaturated fats, and lowering cortisol, will be directly beneficial to the functioning of the thyroid, so that way your thyroid can start working more to produce more thyroid hormone, to better oxidize glucose and produce more carbon dioxide to increase your circulatory function. But one of my favorite herbs for promoting the health of the thyroid is ashwagandha, which not only increases the functioning of the thyroid hormone, but also increases carbon dioxide production. So that's a great herb actually for restoring overall sexual vigor, and probably for that reason. Moving along, some other tips, very simple things you can do to start correcting and managing the diabetes, improving thyroid function and the production of carbon dioxide, and specifically lowering prolactin, would first and foremost be to increase your intake of calcium. So calcium is beneficial for erectile dysfunction in a couple of different ways in regards to the things we've mentioned in this video. First and foremost, calcium is a natural antagonist to prolactin. So it's going to lower elevated prolactin, which is a major contributing factor to erectile dysfunction. But calcium also is going to increase your cell's ability to use glucose, which is going to be beneficial for managing the potential diabetes aspect of ED. And something else very simple that you can acquire effortlessly, probably right now you have some in your kitchen, is salt or sodium. This is also going to increase your body's ability, your cell's ability, to utilize, consume, and oxidize glucose. So both of these things, calcium and salt, are going to not only improve the functioning of the metabolism, but specifically will increase the production of carbon dioxide, at least in theory. So I'm going to end this video here, because ultimately I could get off on a tangent and get into an entire series and a very long lecture on managing diabetes and hypothyroidism, which are videos I'll save for another time. We also have other videos here on the channel if you want to learn more about those topics in general. But the takeaway from this video is that erectile dysfunction and even diabetes, these are all just symptoms of a diseased or stressed state. So a lot of the times the pathologies start connecting and you start to piece together this big picture, which is why it's easy for me to go off on a tangent. Nevertheless, diabetes is a risk factor for erectile dysfunction, and I don't necessarily know which one is worse. It probably depends on your viewpoint of it. However, that does bring this video to a close. I am going to end it here before it gets too long. If you've enjoyed it and found it helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and of course, if you're interested in learning more, we have tons of videos here on the channel, so definitely browse around for various health-related topics that you are interested in. There are various other videos on the subject of erectile dysfunction that you can reference as well for more additional tips different than the ones I mentioned here today. And if you're interested in learning even more beyond our YouTube channel, we have tons of content on our blog or our website and our tonic herb shop. All of these things you can find in the description box below.